You see it on every art channel because every artist has the same question. Where do I begin? Everyone gives their tips on what's best to start practicing, what are the best tools, and what techniques are the most important. But what if they're getting it all wrong? Hey everyone, for those that don't know me, it's nice to meet you. I'm Pippin, and to everyone else, welcome back. Today I'm going to be giving a real beginner's guide to art and talk a bit about how to get started, with very little focus on all that fancy setup and practice techniques, and much more focus on your relationship with art and the meaning it has for you. No shade to those other channels though, I think their information is super important. I just think they're skipping a step. During this video, I'm going to break this down into 5 levels of love as an artist while I have one of my own art processes playing in the background. Each section is geared toward a very specific spot in the process of being a beginner, starting with the very newest beginner, someone who knows almost nothing about art or being an artist, but is ready to put themselves out there and maybe find love in a new skill. Level 2 will be all about covering the basics of starting as if you're just getting to know art. Level 3 will be all about the things that will eventually matter as you start to really develop your passion for art. Level 4 will cover coming into your own as an artist and developing an art style. And level 5 will be all about moving things to the next level once you think you're less of a beginner, but not quite skilled enough to call yourself a pro yet. If at any point you feel like you should be at the next level, feel free to skip forward in the video. This video is here for you to learn and grow in a way that works for you. So I promise I will not be hurt by you taking only what you need from this video. So with that understanding out of the way, let's get right into it. Let's say you're just starting out. Maybe art is an old friend. Maybe you've doodled in a sketchbook before, or you have some awesome raw talent, but you never really decided that you were ready to take the plunge and actually be an artist or put in the effort to get better. I would put you at level 1. And this level is all about deciding what your goals are as an artist and giving yourself the big reality check of what steps that you're willing to take in order to grow. Now, as a quick spoiler, in case you think I'm trying to discourage you, your answer is allowed to be that you're not willing to do a whole lot, you're just here to have fun. So, in order to define your goals in any situation, be that dating, getting a job, or being an artist, first thing you have to do is ask yourself a very big question. What are you looking to get out of this? Literally everybody is an artist because everyone is born with the urge to create. It does not matter how old you are or what you do or what you look like. You can be an artist as long as you decide that you want to do art. And it's not too late for you. It's not that you're in the wrong demographic. And creating any kind of art is not too girly or too masculine to get into. I know it's often easier said than done, but don't let societal notions dictate what you do with your passions. And I know that I'm using art a little loosely here. You can create anything you want, and as long as you say it is, it's art. So when I say art in this video in the future, please assume that I'm talking about digital or traditional visual drawing and painting mediums for now, but you definitely don't have to limit yourself to those. How and what you create is entirely up to you, so you kind of have to question, why are you choosing this medium? It's totally okay for your answer to be, I just want to try it, or it just looks fun. But it's also okay for your answer to be that you want to get rich and famous. Don't get me wrong. You need to understand that without passion, the latter is not nearly as probable, and it is not nearly as sustainable an answer emotionally as the former. Remember that if you choose this as a casual goal, you're not going to improve quickly. For context, I've been painting digitally for over 10 years, and I only really saw rapid improvement over the last 3 or so at most. And it's because I buckled down and said, okay, this is going to be my career now, so I need to take it seriously and put a career amount of time into it. Before that, I didn't put as much effort into learning or practice, and it meant that the improvement that I made was slow and sometimes not even noticeable. And not improving is fine if that's what you want to do. But remember that you need to pick a goal that works for you and decide what that means moving forward for you. It'll be important to know what you're wanting to get out of your goal and what you're willing to put into it, or it might get discouraging later if you feel like you're not improving and don't know why. Now that you have a good grasp on what your goals are with learning art, remember that it will take a while to meet your goals, and even longer if you're trying to meet them casually. And even if you are putting a lot of effort into it every day, try not to let yourself get upset if you're not improving as fast as you'd like. I know you've heard it before, but it is a marathon, not a race. And the important part here is that it's one that you haven't trained for up to this point. So you're gonna suck at it before you get good at it, and that's kind of the cost of entry. But as long as you keep at it, you'll get there. So prepare yourself for the long haul. And a side note here, some people will be better when they first start than others. There is such a thing as natural talent, but most talent is also a skill, as it's kind of just applying other skills you have to a new data set. If you don't have raw talent, you can still be a great artist. And frankly, people without raw talent often become better artists because they actually have the passion to work towards it. I say this as someone who personally didn't think that I needed to dedicate practice for a long time because, yeah, that's what people who aren't a prodigy have to do, not me. And trust me, people who had the passion before I did absolutely surpassed me. And it's taken a lot for me to build that passion up and get back to that point myself. So don't feel like you're behind if you don't start with talent, and don't feel like you're ahead enough that you can get complacent if you do start with talent. So anyways, level 2 is falling in love. So earlier I mentioned passion. Did you know that every boss that I have ever talked to told me that they would rather take someone with passion for the job over someone with skill at the job every time? Because skill is a learned thing, but passion keeps you wanting to learn. Art is the exact same way. The most important thing about starting out is deciding whether or not you love it enough to keep doing it. Now, for those of you who are dating or have dated, when you've started to get to know someone, do you start out with all the technical questions about building a life together and all of that the very first time that you talk? Probably not, because it'll scare them away, or it'll scare you away, or both. Instead, you start with casual interests and hobbies and discovering shared interests. This isn't just true when you're falling in love with people, but with any new thing you're interested in. If you get into all the messy details right away, you're going to get overwhelmed and struggle to want to continue because now this thing has become a chore. And don't get me wrong, when you love something, those things that used to be scary and chore-like do turn into reasons to love the thing. But when you start out, you need to kind of get attached before you work out all the baggage, because when you do start to unpack, you can do it with a lot more care, which means that this entire step is about focusing on the things you enjoy about art while you get to know it so that you can develop the passion for the messy stuff. So now you know your goals with art and you know that you have to start out slow, but let's talk about what that means. It means focusing on your interests. What things do you like? What do you find interesting? And what do you want to draw? When I first started, I mostly drew anime cat girls, which hasn't changed, but they were all the same basic design back then. I would have a jacket or cloak or whatever was vogue in Final Fantasy at the time, cat ears, and shorts and a tube top because those were easy. I also frequently put goggles on people's heads. They were kind of awful in style, design, and anatomy, but they got me to love art enough that I kept going. So, what do you like? Would others cringe at the thought? Are you afraid it's going to be super ugly? Honestly, as long as you're enjoying it, it doesn't matter. Take the time to fall in love with it and develop that passion, and heck anyone who says that you should be doing anything differently. And this goes the exact same for art styles. A lot of people will actually say that anime art is not real art, or that cartoon animation will get you nowhere, or whatever the hell else. First off, they're wrong. Second, it doesn't matter. If still life drawings don't bring you joy right now, then don't do them right now. They're for a different step. If right now you want to draw Sonic the Hedgehog with the thickest lines possible and color him inverted colors and call him your OC Xenos, then that is what you should be doing right now. And if I got too specific there, don't worry, Matthew, this isn't a call out to you specifically. Now, when it comes to any sort of creating, you will also have to decide what tools you want to use, which I think falls under falling in love with the medium. Watercolor is a great example. I hated watercolor until I got actually good paints and pens, and now it's one of my favorite mediums because bad watercolors will ruin your day, and that is just a fact. It's true that a poor craftsman blames their tools, but a good craftsman knows the value of a good tool. I'm not saying go out and buy the fanciest tools right away. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. Learning is messy, so get messy with dollar store items or the freest digital art program that you can find and a mouse. Work with the bare minimum, and if you think you might find more joy in it, build up your tool set and skill together. I'm not going to give specific suggestions on any tools or programs, but I will talk a bit about how I feel about the importance of a good one for each one. Digital or traditional will often be the first choice that you have to make before deciding on things, and so that's kind of what I want to talk about first here. For some people, this decision is already made for them because they can't really afford to get into the digital side. So they have to go with traditional. I will say the barrier to entry for traditional is a lot lower, as it's way cheaper to start out, but digitally will ultimately become the cheaper one further down the road you go, because traditional tools get expensive real fast and they need to be replaced quite a bit more often if you're using them regularly. Another thing that might affect your decision on digital versus traditional is the physical feeling between the two. I don't like the feeling of oil paints on me. It's uncomfortable, it smells weird, and it's a bad vibe for me specifically. But I have friends who would not like to paint in anything but oil. And I even want to get back in oils, but I really dislike the idea of the bad texture. So I have so far just avoided it. Others might not like the idea of a wet page, so they avoid watercolor or gouache. Others might not like the fact that they can't feel the texture of a paper or paintbrush in their hand when working digitally. The way you physically feel when working on art matters, so that's another aspect to consider when deciding between digital and traditional. Something else that might cause a decision between the two is convenience. When I want to paint digitally right now, all I have to do is change the angle of my tablet, move my keyboard, open a program, and get to painting. With traditional, I have to get out my paints and my brushes, get various cups full of various liquids, create a palette in some cases, prep the canvas in other cases, wait for drying, tape things down so they don't move, etc., etc., etc. And then I have to put it all back and clean up afterward. With colored pencils, there's kind of a middle ground, but I still have to put more pressure into the work to make it look good, which means a long time working hurts my wrists. So how much you're willing to set up or take down after you're done and what level of energy you're willing to put into the process is honestly a major factor too. But ultimately, most people I know either started with traditional and really don't care to learn digital, or learned digital after traditional and now enjoy doing both, myself included. So just so you know, you don't have to stick with any one medium, but your wallet might thank you if you start with just one. So as far as specific tools go, I'm gonna break down what you might need based on the medium. For digital, you'll need a computer, and when starting out, you can use pretty much basic crap. I started on a $200 Walmart laptop that overheated after 40 minutes of use. I wouldn't recommend it, but as long as the other tools you're using are super basic, it really won't matter. You'll need either a mouse or a drawing tablet, which is a different thing than a standard tablet. Drawing tablets can come screenless or with a screen, but one is much more expensive, the one with the screen. I do prefer having a screen, however, but trust me, the hand-eye coordination between a blank tablet and your computer screen takes very little time to develop, so starting with a screenless cheap bamboo is not a terrible option for when you're starting. You can also just start with a standard tablet, and a $200-ish range is going to get you the best that you can until you start getting an iPad. And iPads start to cost $1,000 and more and more and more and more after that. So I would heavily suggest not starting there, especially if you don't know if it's something you're going to like. Anyway, you'll need a drawing program. I use Creative Cloud Photoshop, and I genuinely enjoy it, but it comes at a monthly cost of approximately a lot, so it's definitely more expensive to start with too. There are free services, and I think the best one is Krita, but it's kind of a big boy, so it might be too much for your computer. I've seen beautiful things done in Paint, so this is another situation of slowly building up what you can do instead of going directly for the best of the best. You will also need brushes for said program, but I generally only use the main brushes unless I need something specific. And then I usually create my own brush because I like the way they look better, which I will make a tutorial on for Photoshop eventually, I'm sure, if someone asks. So if that's something you're interested in, type "make a brush tutorial slapper goob or I swear I will eat thine toes" in the comments so that I can forget that I told you to do that and get really confused. But the point of the matter is brushes are fun to play with, but aren't actually a necessity for spending money, because what the program comes with will be more than good in most cases. You'll also need your starting canvas. Most programs start these off in white, and obviously it doesn't cost money to start a digital canvas that I know of. But please, for the sake of your eyes, make the color more off-white when you start. I start with a gray color specifically, and this will prevent problems later. Save your eyes. Another thing that doesn't cost money but is worth mentioning to newbies is layers. Most programs that you can find will have layers that you can use. and there is no wrong way to use them. You can use a lot of layers or only a few layers, but if you use only one, I respect the hell out of you and you terrify me. How did it feel being valedictorian? When it comes to traditional, you have a lot more things to think about, and all of them depend on your medium. The first one is paper. This can be cheap or expensive depending on what you're looking for. If you just need to sketch something before throwing the idea on your canvas, then it can be a ripped off piece of envelope. But if you're wanting to make the drawing itself last, you'll want something more sturdy. A lot of study into the meaning of GSM is in your future. Canvases. These mostly come in expensive, especially when they start to get bigger. But if you live in the States, the dollar store small canvases are great for starting out and practicing on. Paints. If you want them to actually stick to what you're working on, you're not going to want to go for the cheapest. That said, you can spend $30 to $50 on a base set of paints, and that'll be enough to start with. So it can be cheapish too. The main thing to remember with paints, though, is that they all have a primary and secondary color to them. Reds will either have a blue or yellow tint, and mixing a red paint with a yellow tint to a blue paint with a yellow tint will get you brown, negating everything you ever learned in primary school. Pencils. I personally think that these are the ones that you should not cheap out on, even when starting out, because pencils will be one of the things every artist will use the absolute most. So having ones that you like that work smoothly and don't hurt your hands matters. I personally like Papermate clear point pencils, but this is not paid advertising unless Papermate wants to pay me to advertise them, in which case, what's up, baby? My email is artrikasai@gmail.com. Hit me up. Anyway, brushes. These are a lot like pencils to me. They're one of the things that you should really be taking the most seriously. That said, they can easily also be one of the most expensive tools, and unlike pencils, you kind of need a variety in order to paint well. So I would do a little research on what is a good one to start out with, and then build up your stock on your favorites as you grow. Pens. These are less important until you decide specifically that you're interested in inking or not. I use Copics because I am a basic bitch and they feel nice in my hands. But when you're starting out, any decent ballpoint pen will be a good enough indicator for your future if this is something you decide that you're interested in. Other things you might want to look into are rulers, French curves, markers, pastels, what have you. But overall, that's kind of a basic idea of what you've got in store for you. The last thing to remember in this stage is that you're going to kind of be in a honeymoon stage, which means that you're going to be doing a lot of creating, which means that you're going to be learning a lot and improving very quickly, even if you're not exactly doing so with direction. On top of that, if you're fairly new to something, it is so much easier to develop a lot of new, easy skills, which also means that there's going to be a point at which you stop seeing a ton of improvement and start getting more into the grind of things instead of having everything be so new all the time, which means that you're in level 3, the passion stage. You have discovered the passion, you are officially enamored, and now it's time for you to build a deeper connection and start thinking about things that will eventually matter. In a relationship sense, this is generally when you start talking about whether or not you want kids in the future or like what the ideal living situation is, things like that. Maybe you haven't said, I love you yet, but you both kind of feel the words on your tongues. In art, this is what you start looking at what becoming truly skilled means, both to you and in a general sense, and what you need to do to get there. You start to think about, I could do this for the rest of my life, and maybe even contemplate taking on your first commission, which is never a requirement to being a real artist, by the way. It's just something that like 99% of the artists I've ever met have thought about, so I thought I'd mention it here. So, what will eventually matter? What should you be keeping in mind and maybe even starting to study now so that you can build up to being a dedicated artist? Well, you need to work to understand what studying with intention looks like. Before, you didn't have direction, you were having fun, and now you have a clearer goal in mind and you want to see yourself hit that goal. So, you need to learn how to work toward that goal. This means researching how to study. That said, studying is its own whole topic that couldn't even begin to be fully covered in its own video. But I do post videos and shorts on different ways to study regularly. So if that's something you're interested in getting to know more about, go ahead and hit me with that subscribe button and maybe leave a comment telling me what kind of things you want to study so I can give specific tips and tricks to you. Yes, that is my shameless plug. It's my video. I can do what I want. That said, there are some basic things that you should be focusing on in the what to study category. These are things that we call fundamentals. I have a basic rundown here of a few different fundamentals, and if any one of these are something you're more interested in than another, let me know and I'll prioritize a tutorial on that. The first fundamental I'm going to discuss is drawing lines versus drawing shapes. A lot of painters tend to paint like sculptors or focus specifically on shapes rather than the outline of any specific item. This is even true of typically lined forms of art like comic styles or anime. That said, when first starting to study, it'll generally be by drawing and thinking in outlines. A big part of what you need to study here is changing the way that your brain sees outlines into shapes. And by shapes, there's kind of two meanings that work together. There's the form, which is what shapes the object is built out of, and the light and shadow, which interacts based on where the light hits those shapes. Focusing on those will help you see objects as their shapes rather than their outlines. This is especially useful for painting faces, but will ultimately help you convey the thought of your images a lot more easily in most scenarios. The second fundamental I'm going to talk about is anatomy versus gesture with motion and flow. We all know what anatomy is. It's how a body or object logically exists. If a body has a specific bone, it's always going to have that bone in each movement unless that bone is removed forcibly. Gesture is the way a body or object moves and how it interacts with its environment. Gesture is often focused on as the action itself rather than the object, which has two important bits to it, motion and flow. The motion of an object is conveying how that object is moving. The flow is the motion you're trying to encourage in the eye of the viewer. Basically, if an arm is swinging up, you'll want to convey where it's going with motion. If the arm is swinging up and it's about to hit a beehive, you're going to want to convey the danger of that action with forcing the flow of the eye onto the beehive. Both can and should work together with the outlines of objects, but often encouraging motion and flow with a gesture will look wrong if the anatomy is correct. And so understanding how to reconcile an objective truth like anatomy with a subjective comfort like motion and flow in a gesture will become important and is another great fundamentals to study. The third fundamental for us to cover is perspective and how much it matters, because perspective is one that artists hear a lot. So for those of you who don't quite understand what it is, it's the mathematical rules for how we interpret space and how objects exist within it. When it comes to art, it can be taken on playfully or seriously and look just as good as either, and better as one for a specific image than another. That said, this is one of those fundamentals that is easily ignored if you know how to ignore it. I don't think perspective is incredibly important when you're first starting out, but the more you want to build compositions and stories in your art, the more important it will become, especially when factoring in anatomy and movement, etc. The next fundamental is color theory and relative color. Color theory is basically how to use color to achieve all of the other fundamentals that you're trying to achieve, including shape language, composition, contrast, etc. This will make your work look good. People have a lot of rules and understanding of how color works, but the two main takeaways that I want you to get from this video is 1, relative color, or the way that colors interact with each other in an environment, is the most important thing that you need to understand about color, because that will make your color schemes make the most sense. And 2, black and white in color are not in fact the devil. A lot of artists will say that pure black and pure white are awful, and there are points where that is true. If you're shading by just adding black or lighting by just adding white, you're going to have fairly flat images. And if you're only using white for all of your lighting and only using black for all of your shadows, your works aren't going to feel like they have a lot of dimension. But if that's your intention, go for it. And if it's not, then there are still great ways to incorporate the colors. I do it all the time. Our next fundamental is composition, or the way that an entire piece fits together. There are tons of different types of composition, and knowing how they work and having them in your head will build for better compositions. But they become second nature pretty quick. There is a lot on this topic, so prepare for a deep dive when you do research it. But if you're looking to improve your illustration game, it is the way to go about it. In that same vein is dynamics, which discuss how certain amounts of unbalance, both in poses and the frame of the image itself, make for an exciting and interesting piece. And lastly, another fundamental that's often ignored, but I think is a lot more important than people give it credit for, is contrast, or the difference between light and shadow, or color differences, or both, in an image. Typically, Areas with a lot of contrast are going to draw more focus, so understanding how to use contrast to build up compositions, motions, flow, and shape language, and even perspective can be super duper important. There are even entire ways to study using just 2 colors to build contrast. In fact, Cynics has a great tutorial on it. These aren't all the fundamentals, just the ones that I focus on the hardest right now, and ones that I find incredibly important in my day-to-day painting. All of these fundamentals are important, and eventually, if you stick with it long enough, you'll find yourself interested in learning each one, and you'll even pick up on them as you go without trying to learn them. But in this stage, I kind of think that just studying the fundamentals that you want and enjoy is important. Remember that your main goal is to build up the love that you have for art with each new step. And as you get more dedicated, you'll be able to take more steps with things you weren't interested in before. And speaking of taking the next step, let's talk about level 4, getting committed, art style, and how to go about it. So, to me, there are 4 main important things about how to define your art style, and those are design, structure, observation, and detail. So, design is the part of an art style that makes your art immediately recognizable by other people. This might be difficult to attain, especially if you're trying to work in someone else's style, like if you're trying to work for Blizzard, but can also be used to figure out what you do and don't like about other people's styles. Deciding what things stand out to you and what matters to you because of it when creating your art style is all of what goes into that design. The structure of an art style is all of the technical bits, the rules, and maybe the less notable things about your style. Do you always add a little C-shape highlight on the nose? That's one of the rules to your style that dictates its structure. Even if no one will go, oh, there's a C-shape on the nose, it's this artist. These rules create and add to the design, but are also separate from the design, kind of like behind the scenes in a movie. Observation is the part that makes your art style yours, and it's based on how you observe the world, art, and style itself. What I mean by that is your perspective on the world dictates how you draw it. I'm hella gay and think women are absolutely gorgeous. If I didn't, I probably wouldn't draw as many women as I do. I'm also into tarot and other occult things, and if I wasn't, I probably wouldn't incorporate so many magical elements to my paintings, and so on and so forth. Your observation of the world is an inherent addition to your style that cannot be replicated by anyone, and really minimally can be changed even by you, except based on how you grow and who you become. And lastly, style comes down to the amount of details that you add into your image, both in the sense of how much detail matters and what details are important. Like in my cartoon style, I don't add a lot of details, but in my semi-realism style, I kind of like to go ham. I know people who add 1,000 trinkets into their paintings and detail each one out, and others who add a splotch of color and go, that's a necklace. What you find important enough to add will dictate your style as well. Now, here's the obnoxious but also kind of fun part about style. Yours is going to change a lot no matter how much you go out of your way to find your style, and people will recognize your art even if you don't think you have a style. I talk a lot more about what style actually is and how to develop yours in my video, Finding, Simplifying, and Developing Your Art Style. So if you're more interested in learning how to build that up and what it takes to create a style, go ahead and check that one out. But for now, let's talk about the last but longest level of love. And before I get into that, trust me, these things do cycle. You can always go back to the honeymoon phase a million times, especially with art. But this is generally the longest lasting one, even in those cycles. And that's level 5, keeping the spark alive, getting past the plateau. So now you're actively committed to art. You love it and you want to spend as much time with it as is healthy for you. And you are dedicated to improving your skill and learning all that you can. But now you've hit that point where it's normal and things aren't really growing or progressing. Or maybe you feel like there's not a lot of places to grow or progress anymore, but you don't want to give up or stop. You just don't know how to move forward. This is the point at which you should start getting out of your comfort zone. This is when you should do new forms of practice, go to the fundamentals you might not have liked as much before, and try new things with art. Maybe pick up a new medium or study something you never thought about studying, like how to draw crabs because they're fucking wild. What the hell are those things? Grab an art challenge or just do something fun outside of the box with art. Take a whole day doodling nothing or go paint with a friend outside of your house. You need to continue to make an effort to reignite the spark, even if the flame that you have for art is still burning. Or if the issue is that you're overwhelmed, tired, or bored with art, remember that absence makes the heart grow fonder, so you should consider taking a break from art and resting, especially if you've started doing this for extra income or all of your income. Kiki's delivery service has a great message on this if you haven't seen it, and I would absolutely recommend it. Anyways, thanks for sticking with me through to the end, and I hope I helped clarify a very important set of steps to understanding in the starting out process. If you have any questions about anything in the video or have any suggestions for future videos, please let me know, and if this helped clarify some questions you had for yourself, I would love to know that too. If you liked this video, please drop me a like and hit me with that subscribe button for more tips and tricks on art and improvement, as well as art memes, tutorials, and other artistic support. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video.